got a good look at Valanciunas from the New Orleans Pelicans as Lithuania ended up beating Team USA. And it was a surprising defeat, although not too surprising. They've beaten them like 3 out of the last 4 matchups, which I think is pretty interesting. But you got to see just the versatility, the rebounding. We were getting killed on the boards. And of course, this has spawned like, hey, the Lakers should go and get Valanciunas. And here's the beautiful thing. So there were reports a couple weeks ago now that the Lakers were actually targeting Valanciunas and that they were going to keep an eye on Valanciunas, something along those lines. And it makes sense, right? Anthony Davis wants to play the power forward position. The Lakers could use some depth at center, and especially if AD is going to play the power forward more frequently, it would be nice to have that just solid, versatile type center that can man the middle. Also, the New Orleans Pelicans actually want to trade Valanciunas. They're hoping to get a younger center for the future. They want to go and get somebody that they view long term. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to trade Valanciunas for that. But the idea is Valanciunas is very likely going to leave. They don't want to lose him for nothing. And so the hope is, okay, well, maybe then we can go and get somebody more long term and unload Valanciunas in the process. So the Lakers could easily make a bid. He's not going to cost a fortune. He's still relatively young. He's 31 years old, but this is the final year of his contract. He's only making $15 million, so it wouldn't be hard to get there. Maybe the Lakers could work something out. He also would be a nice just center even next year, right? Like, it's definitely somebody that I hope the Lakers keep on their radar, right? If you can't trade for him this year, I wouldn't mind maybe going and acquiring him next year, especially when we have like a little more cap. Cap should be rising, stuff like that. But as a whole, Valanciunas could provide some real solid stability. He's a big center. He's a guy that's not going to get bullied and pushed around. Not like this super, elite level defensive player, right? He's not a guy that's just going to lock down the paint in the interior, but you still have Anthony Davis, especially if he's playing in that kind of like scout role that Darvin Ham likes to put him in. Then Valanciunas is more than enough to hold his own. He's still a guy that averages a block per game for his career. He's a guy that is also a pretty solid passer, right? He has some really good versatility in that regard. This is a guy that has had seasons where he's averaged just under 3 assists per game, especially as a guy that is more known as like a back to basket, dump it off, let him go to work. He can kind of like operate in that area. He's also last year a 35% 3-point shooter, and he's a 36% 3-point shooter for his career. But to be fair, and to put that in perspective, he only averages about 1 3 per game for his career, although the last 2 years, he's actually picked that up to about 2 threes per game, which, if Anthony Davis playing the power forward, how much are you going to have Valanciunas out on the 3-point line? Like, that is something I think would be interesting. He has the ability to knock it down, and we've seen games where he's gotten hot, knocked down, several. But this guy is a 14 and 10 guy. Right? This is a guy that night in and night out can provide some consistency and provide some rebounding, right? Like, that would be really good for this Lakers team to have a guy that could just go and get rebounds, a guy that averages 3 to 4 offensive rebounds per game. So he's a guy that is going to give us a lot of second chance points, a lot of second chance opportunities. And we have such a big roster with so much versatility. I like the idea of having that big man that can just go get rebounds. You can, if the offense is getting stagnant, right, you can just dump the ball down to him and let him go to work, allow him to go create. He's a guy that, is very skilled around the rim and can just easily put the ball in the hoop. He also has a bit of a mid-range, right? This is a guy that has just quality versatility. He's also a big man that can actually shoot free throws, which is nice. He's 82% last season. He's 80% for his career, right? So he's also a guy that you can trust. You don't have to worry about, like the hacka eval or whatever you want to call it, right? To where it's like, we got to take him out of games. Like, no, he could be placed in games late. He'd be a solid matchup, kind of round out our front court. Even if we get, say, a Christian Wood, right? A front court of Christian Wood, Anthony Davis, Valanciunas, and Hayes, I think is a really nice four-man group for that spot. Then, of course, you could always go small. You have small ball options, small ball units. You could have several other guys at the four spot, such as Rui Hachimura, things like that. But I do think if the Lakers were able to pair Valanciunas and Anthony Davis, I do think that that is a pairing that can work. Both big men can be unselfish. Both big men can share the ball. We've seen Anthony Davis work well with other big men, and big men that can't even stretch the floor as well as Valanciunas. Again, Valanciunas isn't this elite floor spacer, but he's better than what JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard were. Right? Like, this is a guy that legitimately can, knock it out from 15 down. Anthony Davis obviously needs to improve his three-point shooting, right? Like, that was a big problem. Like, he wants to play the power forward position. I don't think there's anything wrong with running a two big man unit and kind of going with some size, especially with Anthony Davis's versatility and his ability to defend out on the perimeter. Granted, you don't want him chasing around like point guards and stuff, but he is a guy that can stay in front of guys, moves his feet well, good pick and roll defensive big man. Valanciunas is a solid at rotating. Again, not a guy that you want chasing around the perimeter, but you could kind of have him down on the block, and then Anthony Davis, like I said, in that scout position. I think that could work beautifully. And you got two legit big men down there that just, again, add length, and you got to fight through the trees for. But it still boils down to Anthony Davis and his ability to stretch the floor. 15 feet in, Anthony Davis has still been money. But that 15 out, it's been rough for him, especially the three-point shot. Since the bubble, it's just like he's gotten worse and worse and worse. And if you're going to run two bigs and you're going to run 80 at the four, you're going to need him to knock down the occasional three. Not saying we need him to be, 50% from three or anything crazy like that, but we need him enough to where you can play a guy in Valanciunas who's not this big, floor spacing, three-point shot making guy. He can knock it down occasionally, but you need a guy in Anthony Davis that can legitimately hit the outside shot with consistency. And with these two guys, you're gobbling up rebounds, right? Anthony Davis, 12, 13 rebounds a game. You got Valanciunas who can go get you 10 plus. Valanciunas, we've seen him go off for 30 and 15. I think he even had a 30 and 20 game or somewhere close to that. So this is a guy that can absolutely control, dictate, and take over games. He's also a veteran. And that's something that I really like, the idea of adding that level of stability, right? You look at the Lakers' big men currently, right? Remove Anthony Davis from the equation, right? Right now, it's just Jackson Hayes and Colin Castleton, right? And Colin Castleton is on a two-way. But those are your two young prospects that you're going to grow and develop and build. Jackson Hayes, we'll see if he's willing to stay long-term, especially if he has a really good season, to somebody offer him more money. But the idea is you got a nice young, 23-year-old center. You got, another one in Colin Castleton. You got your foundational big men for the foreseeable future. It would be nice to have that veteran experienced type center that you can throw in big moments and big games, and they've been there. They've done that. They're not afraid of that moment. For them, it's just another couple minutes or whatever, right? As opposed to somebody like Jackson Hayes who hasn't been there or hasn't been in the playoffs and has those nerves and those jitters, and it's we got to get a bucket here. We're gonna dump it down, right? And the shot gets missed, and it's Jackson Hayes is freaking out, where you have a guy, Valanciunas, knows, okay, that's my ball. I'm going to go get that. I like the idea of having guys, veteran guys, that can kind of round out this roster nicely, be a good influence for this roster, be good mentors for other guys. Like Colin Castleton has a very similar style to Valanciunas, right? I think Colin Castleton might be a better passer or have the potential to be a better passer. That dude is throwing absolute darts. He is fun to watch. But they have very similar style games. I actually think Valanciunas would be a very nice type of center to learn from if you're Colin Castleton. Now, again, it boils down to what would you have to give up in trade, right? And what is the ask? Like, can you get him for, a couple seconds, right? Can you get him for like 2 second-round picks? Sure, I do that all day. But if the Pelicans are asking for, a first or something crazy like that, you're better off waiting. But if out of all of the big men that you could potentially acquire that are realistic to acquire and that could actually make a huge impact on this roster, Valanciunas, I think, is definitely up there at the top of the list, right? Again, he's an expiring contract. So he's a guy that if it works, you could re-sign, and he's only making like $14 million a year now. So he's not going to be, how much more is he going to be? If anything, you can make an argument he might be less because he'd be 32 next year, right? Could you get him for, I don't know, $10 million a year or something like that, right? With LeBron also has the ability to opt out. So, like let's say you do acquire Valanciunas, Lakers win the championship. You don't think LeBron will say, I'll eat $10 million so we can go try to keep everybody together to go repeat? Of course he would, right? Because now you're talking about him potentially getting number 6, right? And I just think, that adds a level of attainability where it's like, how many teams, one, need a Valanciunas, two, how many teams are willing to trade assets to acquire Valanciunas with the risk of him leaving after this season. And, if you're the Lakers, to you're trying to contend for an NBA championship, and Valanciunas is a need, at least currently. I mean, we'll see what happens, right? If the Lakers get Wood and somebody else, right, like say a Myers Leonard or something, then maybe you don't need Valanciunas. But outside of that, if you could go get Valanciunas, that would be solid. Also, I'd keep an eye out on maybe even a buyout. If the Pelicans struggle and they're not looking too good, I wouldn't be surprised if Valanciunas requests a buyout. But maybe we'll talk about that separately in another video. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? You like the idea of Valanciunas? Do you not? How do you feel? Whatever your thoughts are, love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments.